She finally spoke, not with noise or spectacle, not with the hunger for attention that so often surrounds famous names, but with the calm strength of someone who has lived long enough to understand what truly matters. When Elon Musk's mother began to share her truth, it was not a speech meant to shock the world, yet it quietly did. It wasn't about rockets or electric cars or billion-dollar valuations. It was about something far deeper, something almost uncomfortable in its honesty. It was about motherhood, endurance, loneliness, faith in oneself, and the unseen cost of raising a child the world would later call extraordinary. She spoke as a woman before she spoke as a famous mother. A woman who had known scarcity before abundance, fear before confidence, doubt before clarity. Her words carried the weight of years, not rehearsed lines, but lived experience. She did not paint her son as a myth. She painted him as a boy once misunderstood, often isolated, and relentlessly curious. She spoke of nights filled with worry, days filled with exhaustion, and years where no one applauded the choices she made. She spoke of holding together a household when everything around her seemed determined to fall apart. There was no bitterness in her voice, only truth. She spoke of how strength is often mistaken for coldness, how discipline is misunderstood as distance, and how allowing a child to struggle is sometimes the most loving act a parent can offer. She admitted that there were moments she did not know if she was doing the right thing. Moments where fear whispered that the world would break her children before they ever had a chance to rise. Yet she stayed steady. Not because she was fearless, but because she chose courage again and again. She revealed that success did not arrive as a sudden miracle. It arrived slowly, painfully, shaped by countless failures that never made headlines. She spoke about teaching her children to solve their own problems, not because she lacked compassion, but because she understood the danger of dependence. She wanted them to know that no one was coming to rescue them, that their minds were their greatest tools. And that responsibility was not a burden but a form of freedom. As she spoke, it became clear that the truth no one expected was not about Elon Musk at all. It was about her. About the silent labor of women whose sacrifices are rarely recorded. About the resilience required to keep going when recognition is absent and resources are limited. About believing in potential before there is proof. She spoke of choosing dignity over victimhood, of refusing to let circumstances define her children's futures. She shared how criticism followed them long before success did. How teachers doubted, peers mocked, and society offered labels instead of understanding. She did not shield her son from these realities. She taught him to stand upright in them. She believed that adversity, while painful, could sharpen vision. She believed that discomfort could build capacity. And she believed that confidence was not something given by others, but something cultivated internally. Her words carried a quiet warning to parents everywhere. That comfort can weaken if it replaces character. That constant praise can distort reality if it is not grounded in effort. She spoke about the importance of letting children fail, not once, but many times, until they understand that failure is not an identity, but a teacher. She spoke about responsibility, about earning respect rather than demanding it, about working not for applause, but for purpose. She admitted that there were years when the world did not see her as a role model. Years when survival was the goal, not inspiration. She spoke about raising children while building her own career, about refusing to collapse into resentment, about modeling independence rather than preaching it. She wanted her children to see that strength was not loud, that perseverance did not require validation. When she spoke of Elon, she did so with balance. She acknowledged his intensity, his stubbornness, his refusal to accept limits. She did not soften his edges for public comfort. She understood that those edges were part of what made him who he is. She revealed that brilliance often comes paired with isolation. That vision can feel like a burden before it becomes a gift. She spoke of watching her son struggle to belong, struggle to be understood, and struggle to fit into systems that were never designed for minds like his. She shared that she never tried to make him normal. She tried to make him capable. Capable of thinking independently. Capable of standing alone. Capable of enduring misunderstanding without losing direction. She believed that the world does not change because of those who blend in, but because of those who persist even when they are uncomfortable to be around. Her truth challenged the fantasy many people hold about success. That it is glamorous, linear, and fair. She dismantled that illusion with grace. She spoke of sacrifice that no one sees, of choices that feel thankless, of seasons where hope must be self-generated. She spoke of trusting a process that offers no guarantees. She also spoke of love, but not the sentimental kind often portrayed in stories. She spoke of love as consistency. Love as accountability. Love as refusing to lower standards even when it would be easier. She believed that loving a child meant preparing them for a world that will not adapt to their sensitivities. She believed that resilience was a gift greater than comfort. As she continued, her message expanded beyond motherhood. It became a reflection on life itself. She spoke of refusing to carry shame for circumstances beyond her control. She spoke of choosing optimism as a discipline, not a mood. She spoke of aging without apology, of continuing to build, learn, and contribute regardless of societal expectations. She revealed that her confidence did not come from comparison, but from acceptance. She did not measure her worth against others' achievements. She measured it by her integrity, her effort, and her refusal to quit. She wanted her children to witness that kind of self-respect, to understand that dignity is not something granted by status. There was a moment in her words where vulnerability surfaced. She admitted fear. Fear that she might fail as a parent. Fear that the world might misunderstand her children beyond repair. Fear that resilience might be mistaken for neglect. Yet she did not allow fear to dictate her actions. She allowed values to guide her instead. She spoke of money not as a goal, but as a tool. She taught her children not to worship it, but to respect its function. She wanted them to understand that wealth without purpose is empty, and ambition without ethics is destructive. She spoke about responsibility that comes with ability, about contribution over consumption. The truth no one expected was that behind one of the most talked about figures in the world was not a story of indulgence, but of restraint. Not of entitlement, but of expectation. Not of protection from hardship, but of preparation for it. She did not raise her children to be admired. She raised them to be capable. Her words resonated because they cut through fantasy. They reminded listeners that greatness is rarely comfortable at the beginning. That vision often isolates before it connects. That believing in someone when no one else does is a quiet form of courage. She spoke about the importance of curiosity, of asking questions even when answers are inconvenient. She encouraged exploration, not obedience. She believed that systems improve only when challenged, and that progress requires discomfort. She modeled this by living her own life unapologetically, refusing to shrink herself to fit expectations. She also addressed criticism with surprising calm. She understood that public opinion is fleeting, that praise and blame are equally unreliable. She taught her children not to anchor their identity in applause or outrage. She wanted them to know who they were when no one was watching. As she spoke, it became clear that her truth was not designed to inspire admiration, but reflection. She was not offering a formula, but a perspective. She was reminding the world that behind every visible success are invisible foundations built patiently, imperfectly, and often alone. She concluded not with certainty, but with acceptance. Acceptance that parenting does not come with guarantees. Acceptance that every choice carries risk. Acceptance that children will ultimately become who they choose to be. Her role, she believed, was not to control outcomes, but to cultivate strength. In the end, her words lingered not because they glorified achievement, but because they honored effort. They honored endurance. They honored the quiet bravery of choosing responsibility over comfort. She finally spoke, and what she shared was not the story people expected, but perhaps the one they needed to hear. She left the world with a reminder that true influence is not always visible. That the most powerful lessons are often taught without words. That shaping a future sometimes means standing firm in the present, even when no one understands. And in that truth, there was a depth that went far beyond fame. Reaching into the heart of what it means to raise a human being capable of facing an unpredictable world. After she spoke, people searched for secrets, formulas, hidden techniques they could copy. But there were none. What she offered was far more uncomfortable than a checklist. She offered responsibility. She reminded everyone that raising a strong mind requires patience most people are unwilling to give. It requires saying no when yes would be easier. It requires trusting long-term growth over short-term peace. She talked about silence, about how not every problem needs immediate interference. She allowed space for thinking, space for consequences, space for growth. She believed that intelligence sharpens when it is challenged, not when it is constantly rescued. She understood that boredom could become creativity, and struggle could become self-belief if it was not interrupted too soon. She spoke about how she never glamorized success in her home. Achievement was expected, but entitlement was not tolerated. She did not praise outcomes without effort. She praised persistence, focus, and honesty. She wanted her children to understand that the world does not owe them understanding, only opportunity if they are willing to work for it. She shared how often people misinterpret her calm as distance. They mistake emotional control for lack of care. But she knew that panic teaches nothing. She chose steadiness so her children could learn stability from her presence. Even in uncertainty, she modeled composure. Because she knew children learn far more from behavior than from advice, there were moments, she admitted, when exhaustion threatened to overpower hope. When bills were heavy, futures unclear, and criticism loud. In those moments, she returned to one belief, that quitting would teach her children the wrong lesson. So she kept going, not because she was certain of success, but because perseverance itself was the lesson. She reflected on independence, especially for women. She refused to present reliance as security. She wanted her children, especially her daughters, to see self-sufficiency as strength, not loneliness. She lived that message openly, continuing to build her own life rather than living through her children's futures. She spoke about age without fear. About how purpose does not expire. About how relevance is not reserved for the young. She continued to evolve, to work, to contribute, showing her children that life does not narrow with time unless you allow it to. That example, she believed, mattered more than any speech. When asked about doubt, she did not deny it. She embraced it. Doubt, she said, is not weakness if it drives preparation instead of paralysis. She taught her children to question themselves without surrendering to insecurity. To refine ideas, not abandon them. To learn continuously rather than defend ignorance. She addressed failure again, this time more personally. She spoke of mistakes she made as a parent. Words she wished she had chosen differently, moments she would relive if given the chance. But she refused to rewrite history with regret. She believed that imperfection, when acknowledged, teaches humility and accountability. Her truth unsettled many because it did not flatter. It did not excuse. It did not promise ease. It demanded ownership. It reminded listeners that greatness is cultivated in ordinary days, in consistent habits, in values repeated until they become instinct. She spoke about character being tested not in achievement, but in pressure. She wanted her children prepared for scrutiny, misunderstanding, and loneliness. She knew that leadership often attracts criticism before it attracts support. She taught them not to seek approval, but to seek alignment with their principles. As she continued, the audience began to realize something profound. This was not a story about raising a billionaire. It was a story about raising a human being capable of carrying weight. Weight of responsibility. Weight of vision. Weight of consequence. She revealed that she never promised her children happiness. She promised them capability. She believed happiness is fragile when it depends on circumstances, but capability endures regardless of environment. She wanted them strong enough to adapt, to rebuild, to start again if necessary. Her voice carried no regret, only clarity. She did not ask the world to agree with her methods. She simply stood by them. She trusted the results not because they were famous, but because they were resilient, and as her words settled, it became clear that the truth no one expected was simple and difficult at the same time. That extraordinary outcomes are usually built on ordinary discipline. That love does not always look gentle. And that the quiet strength of a mother, unseen for years, can shape the direction of the future in ways the world only understands much later. In the quiet after she finished speaking, there was no dramatic pause, no demand for applause. Just a sense of recognition settling in. People began to see that what she shared was not extraordinary because of fame, but because of honesty. She had stripped away the myth and left behind something far more challenging, the truth that strength is taught slowly, intentionally, and often without praise. She spoke one last time about choice. About how every day, in small unnoticed moments, parents and individuals alike are shaping futures. Not through grand gestures, but through consistency. Through the standards they refuse to lower. Through the values they live even when no one is watching. She reminded listeners that children do not rise to words, they rise to examples. She reflected on solitude, on how being misunderstood can either harden a person or refine them. She watched her son choose refinement again and again. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. She believed that those who are willing to stand alone for a season often end up leading many later. She acknowledged that the world often celebrates results without respecting the process. But she believed the process is where character is formed. Long before recognition, long before validation, long before success feels real. She trusted that process enough to let it be uncomfortable. She offered a quiet reminder that comparison is a thief of clarity. That every child, every path, every calling unfolds differently. She never tried to replicate someone else's story. She focused on nurturing the strengths she saw, even when others failed to see them. She spoke of legacy not as wealth passed down, but as values passed forward. Of integrity that survives scrutiny. Of resilience that does not depend on applause. of curiosity that never stops asking better questions. She believed that these were the true inheritances worth leaving behind. There was tenderness in her final words. Not softness, but depth. She expressed gratitude for hardship, not because it was pleasant, but because it was formative. She understood that comfort rarely builds capacity, but challenge often does. She reminded everyone listening that it is never too late to become stronger, wiser, more disciplined. That growth is not reserved for childhood. She herself was proof of that truth. Still building, still learning, still standing with confidence earned, not borrowed, she did not claim perfection. She claimed responsibility. And in doing so, she released others from the burden of unrealistic expectations. She showed that doing your best does not mean doing everything right. It means doing what aligns with your values, even when outcomes are uncertain. As the last of her words faded, one realization remained. The truth no one expected was not a secret about greatness. It was a mirror held up to everyone listening. A reminder that extraordinary lives are shaped by ordinary choices made consistently over time. She finally spoke, and what she gave the world was not a revelation about fame, but a lesson about foundation. About the quiet power of discipline. About love expressed through preparation rather than protection. About believing in strength before it is visible, and in that final silence, it became clear that her influence had never depended on being heard by millions. It depended on being steady when it mattered most. On choosing responsibility over recognition. On shaping character long before the world took notice. That was the truth no one expected. And perhaps, the truth everyone needed.